Stand by. Information to follow.
What have Ronald Reagan's personal witch, J.R.R. Tolkien, the Queen of England's grandmother, and the Moors murderers got in common? Welcome to the Saturday Morning Seance. Let's ramble on. Situated between the three Shires, Staffordshire, Cheshire and Derbyshire, is the spectacularly atmospheric outcropping of Millstone Grit, which is known locally as the Roaches. Lying in what is now the Peak District National Park, this expanse of rock lies above the mill town of Leek and can be found on the A53, Buxton Road. The three distinct outcroppings formed by the Roaches, Hen Cloud and Ramshaw Rocks are the foreboding backdrop for many tales, mythologies and folkloric events that go back into the annals of history. Each of the escarpments has its own particular character and energy. Both the Roaches and Hen Cloud are exhilarating places. The Roaches have a warm, enveloping feel. Hen Cloud a vibrant and triumphant energy, and Ramshaw Rocks a darker and much more elusive energy to describe. On approach, the gothically dramatic moorland with its jutting escarpments has attracted walkers, climbers and tourists over the last couple of centuries. Even royalty have graced the area. In 1872, the Prince and Princess Mary of Teck, the late Elizabeth II's grandmother, visited the Roaches, and even a throne was carved out of the gritstone to commemorate the visit. In 1916, J.R.R. Tolkien, who was stationed at an army barracks in the nearby Cannock Chase to the south, took much inspiration from the area when constructing the mythologies of Middle-earth, and upon visiting the area it is clear to see where he gained some of that inspiration. Another literary notable, inspired by the environment here, was the anonymous author of one of the greatest poems in the English language, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It is held by both amateurs and literary academics that the dialect is written in and closely resembles that of North Staffordshire, in particular the nearby vicinity of Leek, where much of the dialect is still evident in the speech of the locals. The spectacular chasm of Lud's Church has been identified as the setting of the Green Chapel, where Gawain encounters the Green Knight at the end of his eventful year-long challenge. As well as literary connections, the location has been host to guests who are some of the 20th century's most notorious headline makers. From the nearby village of Cheddleton, the famous witch and TV personality Sybil Leek, who went on to become Ronald and Nancy Reagan's spiritual advisor and astrologer, was supposedly deflowered in a sex magic ritual at Ramshaw Rocks by none other than the self-proclaimed wickedest man in the world, Aleister Crowley. And the mythology, endorsed by Sybil Leek, suggests that the hexagram there was supposedly carved into the rocks to commemorate this very event. True or not, this site has been a magnet for occultists and tourists of a darker hue for a long time. Moving towards the summit of Ramshaw Rocks past the many rock simulacra apparent in the weather-beaten eroded boulders is a spot where two of the 20th century's most notorious killers stopped for a picnic. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley paused here for a while, photographing each other. Now, was this to immortalise a day trip, or was it for darker, much darker reasons? Was this to a reconnoitre for possible grave sites? Was this image of Brady pointed to something or somewhere in the landscape? The summit of Ramshaw Rocks culminates a few yards on with a large boulder called the Serpent Stone. This naturally occurring boulder has been augmented by human hands, and a large eye and nostrils chipped into its surface, which is thought to be of a Bronze Age date. From the air, the entirety of the outcropping can be imagined as a serpent, the tail of which emerges from the chasm of Lud's Church, with the head being at the apex of Ramshaw Rocks looking towards the northeast, and possibly the winter sunrise on the solstice. Whatever the reason to visit, the whole area is full of enchantment and magic. It has a dark romanticism. The energies and the mood of the place change with each footfall, and all who visit, I'm sure, will have their consciousness changed in some way.
The journey to this location begins in a place where most journeys end, a churchyard. The 800-year-old Edward the Confessor Church in Leek, which sits atop a mound which has been in use for an estimated 5,000 years, where Neolithic, Bronze Age, Celt and Viking evidence has been unearthed. But why the continuous use in the pre-Christian era? This site lies on the spine of Albion, known to lay hunters as the Belinus Line, running from the south coast to the crest of Scotland. The other reason, in my opinion, for its veneration is the double sunset at the midsummer solstice. The churchyard overlooks the Cheshire Plain, and from this point is sighted a promontory rising up from the plain known as Bosley Cloud. At the summer solstice, the sun appears to set twice. Although just an optical occultation of the sun's disk, our ancestors would have considered this highly significant, as we will see later. As we journey to this spot, some 6 miles distant, there are some amazing sights worthy of investigation. This site is the most magical place I think I have ever found myself. Surrounded by a grove of ancient yews, the waters of this well have curative properties to which I can attest. The well came to the attention of antiquarians in the 17th century after an estate worker, John Gorton, was cured of plague. The atmosphere and energy of this place is almost beyond description. On the route up to Bosley Cloud, we pass varied points of interest, such as Templar graves at St Luke's Church in Biddulph, a well where Cromwell is said to have watered his pony, and adjacent to that is a menhir, which has been vandalised by Christians. Extensively quarried in the 17th and 18th centuries, the summit of Bosley Cloud was at least 80 feet higher. A huge rock stack, known as Bully Thrumble, was quarried to build canal foundations nearby. On top of the cloud, there are remains of over 50 slab-sided pit dwellings, and it is said by the locals that these subterranean dwellings were home to the Redcaps, the good people. In other words, fairies. Does Redcap refer to the colour of their hair? Echoes of the Tuatha Dé Danann, perhaps? Celtic mythology is prevalent in the region and was the tribal land of the Gaelic-speaking Cornovii tribe. The River Dane flows at the foot of the cloud, named after Danu. Nearby Lud's Church, Lud being the Welsh name for Nuada, and lastly, the remains of a massive burial court cairn in the saddle of the cloud, called the Bridestones, after Brede or Bridget, daughter of the Dagda. The midsummer sun sets directly over the Bridestones from the viewing point in St Edward's Churchyard, Leek. A minute later the sun is seen again, exiting the side of the cloud to set once more. Clearly the Bridestones were sighted here because of this. Standing on top of the cloud, an Iron Age carving of a face is positioned looking to the Bridestones and the sunset. This view also overlooks Lindo Moss, where the Iron Age remains of bog bodies, Lindo Man and Lindo Woman, were unearthed. This position also gives a viewing point for the midwinter sunrise, which rises above what is locally known as the Shining Tor in the southeast. Again, reference to the Irish Celtic mythology, the Shining Ones. It is also known as the Great Mother. Below this face on the ridge of the cloud are ancient carvings of 2 concentric repeating arcs. Are they the remembrances of these 2 diametric solar events? Which leads us back to where we started the journey, Edward the Confessor Church in Leek. which has two diametrically opposed rose windows facing north and south, two representations of the sun. Coincidence? All these sites, and those featured in the Roches and Ramshire Rocks report, are within a 10-mile radius. Added to this, these locations are all in line of sight of each other. Here is a prehistoric landscape that is as diverse, mysterious and significant as any other throughout these isles. What's outside your door? As you approach Malop, the air thickens with a sense of ancient power. The hill, rising up from the surrounding countryside, is a place of mystery and enchantment, a landscape imbued with the echoes of a long forgotten past. But as you ascend the hill, you begin to sense that there is something more here, something that lies beyond the veil of time and memory. The ruins of Malop Castle stand like a sentinel, guarding the secrets of this place with a silent intensity. The castle's crumbling walls and turrets seem to speak of an ancient past, a time of knights and chivalry. As you explore the wild and untamed landscape that surrounds it, you can feel the weight of history bearing down upon you, a palpable presence that seems to whisper its secrets on the wind. But do not be fooled by the apparent age of Malop. Its history is complex and enigmatic. While it may appear to be an ancient ruin, it is in fact a carefully constructed folly, a testament to the whims and fancies of a bygone era. And yet, despite its relatively recent construction, there is a sense of timelessness that pervades this place, a feeling that the landscape itself holds secrets that stretch far beyond the boundaries of recorded history. It was built in 1754 by Randall Wilbraham, a local landowner, designed to resemble a ruined castle with a tower, battlements and a dungeon. It was built on top of the hill at Malop, which is a prominent landmark in the area. As a Grade 2 listed building, it is now maintained by the National Trust. Before it was built, the hill was likely used for farming and grazing, and the area around Malop has a long history of human habitation, with Neolithic structures nearby and evidence of settlements and agricultural activity dating back to prehistoric times. The imposing Old Manor Mow is thought to be a Neolithic cairn tomb and was characterised in Dr. Plott's Staffordshire as a rude countenance of ancient veneration. In the medieval period, it was thought to be a defensive structure or lookout point on the hill, as it was strategically located on the border of Staffordshire and Cheshire. It's impossible to explore this landscape without encountering the work of one of its most famous and beloved chroniclers, the author and folklorist Alan Garner, whose novels and non-fiction works have captivated readers for decades. He was born and raised in the nearby town of Congleton and spent much of his childhood exploring the hills and valleys of this magical landscape. His deep connection to Malop is evident in his writing, which is suffused with the folklore and mythology of the region. His best known works, including The Weird Stone of Brisingamen and The Moon of Gomrath, draw heavily on the ancient legends and stories that have been passed down through the generations, and capture the enchantment and mystery of the landscape in a way that is both timeless and deeply evocative. None more so than Red Shift, published in 1973 and features Malop as a prominent setting. The book explores the theme of time travel and features 3 interconnected storylines set in different time periods, taking place at Malop in Roman times, the 17th century and the modern day. It was also made into a film for TV. As you explore the structure at Malop and delve into the hidden history of the place, you will also be following in the footsteps of Alan Garner and exploring the landscape that inspired his writing and fired his imagination. In doing so, you may discover a world of magic and mystery that stretches beyond the confines of the page, a place that seems to straddle the line between the mundane and the mystical, with a sense of otherworldliness that is both captivating and enigmatic. It's a place that is once dynamic and still, ancient and modern, mysterious and familiar. It is a place that invites exploration and contemplation, where you can lose yourself in the timeless beauty of the landscape and the stories that it holds. Beyond the smokestacks and soot-black industrial thrum of the North Midlands is a place built by digging. Clay, coal and iron off the broken, sweating backs of flesh, measured by the ton. Bolgrave Grange is a place charged with a feeling somewhere between world and other worlds. During the 1920s, it became a crippled society hospital and later orthopaedic and spinal wards, and this is where I first encountered the place as a 9-year-old child. My brother and I would play in the grounds at visiting time, in the half-light of dusk, largely unaware that our mother was slowly ebbing away inside the building. At the time, the celebrated gardens were somewhat ramshackle and overgrown, and filled both of us with delight and terror as we navigated its labyrinthine pathways and tunnels, encountering spectral children and awe-inducing gods of old. Son of a wealthy coalmaster and industrialist, Oxford-educated James Bateman inherited the Bateman fortune in the late 1850s. He put the fortune to work building and extending the former medieval farm into a sizable mansion with a 15-acre garden. Also a generous philanthropist, creating schools, housing and buildings for the betterment of the poor of the parish. These activities, along with his outwardly evangelical Christian zeal, was more than enough to get interests other than gardening and philanthropy past the cultural motion sensors of the time. The high Victorian era loved nothing more than a facade, and behind the facade at Bolgrave Grange grew and blossomed not only roses, but the burgeoning tendrils of an occult society, the roots of which may go down through the fertile soil of history back to the incalculable genius of Dr. John Dee, and perhaps even further to the Templars. 1572, John Dee, along with other notables of the time, witnessed a new star emerge in the heavens, now referred to as the Tycho supernova, or SN 1572. Dee and others saw this as the dawn of a new era of enlightenment and formed a new magical order of engaged hermetic thinkers of the time, supposedly calling it the Order of Mondaini, an anagram of I am one. It was short-lived and came to little, but the name of the order and intent is speculated to have been revived some 300 years later at Bolgrave Grange. The Batemans played host to many in high society, especially those with esoteric leanings, rubbing shoulders and entertaining the likes of Arthur Waite, actress Florence Farr, W.B. Yeats, and a host of pre-Raphaelites including Edward Burne-Jones, William Morris and his wife Jane. Bateman, along with his wife Maria and artist Edward Cook, busied themselves with not only horticulture but the design and construction of a series of temples throughout the garden, interconnected by walkways and tunnels. Walking around the garden, now run by the National Trust, it is evident that the surreal design was intended to induce an altered state of consciousness, to destabilize reality, almost like a magical ritual, moving through a Celtic glen complete with original menhirs and sacred spring, swallowed by the darkness of subterranean tunnels and spat out into Chinese temples boasting golden pagan idols. Dank Egyptian tombs with flesh-coloured walls, the inner sanctum terminated with a menacing statue, the Ape of Thoth. All these incongruencies shifting the tilt of the psyche, making it feel like a mystical experience, and all this a theatrical backdrop to robed rites, rituals and seances of the Victorian occult revival. The Grange, described by lay hunters as a nodal point on the backbone of Albion, the Belinus line. Intersecting this line is the largest feature at the Grange, the Wellantonia Avenue. A mile long, it is aligned with the midsummer sunrise, which in days past illuminated the interior of a cave chapel in which were found the graves of Templar knights. Little remains of the chapel today, but the grave covers now curiously form seating outside St. Lawrence's Church, a half a mile away. Some of the esoteric luminaries that regularly attended the gatherings in the 1860s and 70s went on to become synonymous with magical orders such as the Golden Dawn and the Sphere Group. But for the Batemans, the good times came to an end. Inheritance spent and a severe fire in 1896 apparently started during a seance, gutted many rooms and apartments, forcing the Batemans to sell. Biddulph Grange endured the next century largely by luck due to its use as an infirmary of one type or another. The gardens were used to give the sick access to fresh air and bucolic scenery. I see the place as a personal initiation point. My brother and I experienced what we now think of as exposure to something beyond. One evening, we came upon two other children, a girl and a boy, wearing what we thought of as old-fashioned school clothes, short trousers and a pinafore dress. At the time, thinking that they were just from a posh school, but there for the same reason as us, visiting time. Trying to engage with them, they just chuckled and the girl said, "You do know the world is going to end." Then they walked away. On regular visits, we never saw them again. As a 9-year-old, you just shrug and get on with things, thinking them a bit strange. Not too long after this encounter, our mother died. Was this the meaning of the girl's statement? It certainly felt that way at the time, but that magical time, in that magical place, we feel we were given a gift. The sense that consensus reality is just the surface of things. A scarred landscape, carved by wheel rut, hoof, footfall and the rilling ever-present water. Over millennia becoming desire lines, holloways, salt track and corpse road. Time bends and rhymes in these places, and is as non-linear as its trackways. There is nothing plain about the Cheshire Plain. Amongst its lanes, herds and knuckled woods lie prehistoric haunted mounds, sacred waters and monuments to humanity's yearning to communicate with the numinous. Rising from the landscape, Lovell's behemoth, Jodrell Bank. Conceived and built in the 1940s, its post-war titanium white bones casting a weird, discordant melancholy over the landscape. A monument to our lostness, perhaps, or a signifier pointing to the technological event horizon that's approaching, like something from the typewriter of Nigel Neal, simultaneously reassuring yet unsettling. A melancholic radio static hiss of the past, present and future. An almost imperceptible disturbance in the grave clay. An atmospheric disquiet. Maybe due to its flatness, a well-established psychotrope but the monotony of its flat topography is relieved at its northern perimeter, known as the Edge. Just 13 miles south from the centre of Manchester, Alderley Edge, a mineral-rich sandstone escarpment, the southern termination of the Pennines, or, looking north, the end of the flatlands. An in-between place, a liminal, nodal point on the landscape, a place of high and old magic, of above and the below, and at the edge of things. Like most places, it can brag of its UFOs, earth lights, spectral beings, and fairy encounters, but it feels more than that. Until relatively recently, forgotten, beneath the root-fasted rock, like larval galleries, are miles of tunnel, seams worked by the early Bronze Age ancestors, digging for azurite and peacock copper ore, to be magically and alchemically turned into objects by the tribal magus or wizard. Roman shrines to Jupiter have been discovered in these black subterranean arcades. Coins still present on the altar, and bars of gold as if left there yesterday. The magus of the mound builders lives on in legend, transformed in the early medieval period, becoming Merlin, buying a milk-white steed from a local farmer for Arthur's knights who lie slumbering under the hill, awaiting the sounding horn for the last battle of the earth. Although boasting 3 ancient wells, the archetypal magician's name is given to the most renowned spot on the Edge, the Wizard's or Merlin's Well, the face carved into the rock and an inscription, "To take thy fill by the Wizard's will," carved by the stonemason and great-grandfather of Alderley Edge's most heralded son, the writer and archaeologist Alan Garner. This place pulses with magic. You can feel it, almost taste it, like coal smoke on the breeze, and in its bowels some unknowable deep time relic atmosphere, a buried menace or devil's grave. Vestigial links with ritual magic pervade the whole area, from the venerable oaks which form a good portion of the tree canopy to the so-called Druid Circle and the Golden Stone, an unusual prone boulder, curiously shaped, suggestions of some sort of speaking stone or pulpit. And during the 1960s and 70s, the Edge became something of a pilgrimage for occult activity. The offshoot of the Gardnerian Wicca movement used this landscape, headed by self-appointed King of the Witches, known to his acolytes as Verbius, the well-known high priest, and book thief Alex Sanders held coven rituals during moon phases and Sabbats until his desire for headlines drew too much attention. Since this time, occultists of every stripe have been drawn to the place, with activity both above and below ground in its many caves. And each year during All Hallows, the place comes alive, attracting new age cosplayers, covens and Thunderbird-soaked teens, looking for thrills and lighting fires, none of which feels coincidental. At the back of the Edge, a Bronze Age burial mound, appropriated in the Tudor period as an armada beacon, which when ablaze, its flame could be seen as far distant as Liverpool and the North Welsh coast. Beacon fire or not, the uncanny atmosphere of the place, vortex-like, draws many with its magical gravity, those who, knowingly or not, perceive the edges and wrinkles in the gauze of reality. It seems ironic that as we look out there to the cosmos with billion-dollar telescopes in hope of discovery of some cosmic armada beacon, the discovery is under our feet in our relationship to these landscapes as we fleetingly move through them in our short tenancy, adding to the palimpsest of stories, strata and mythology, only to be unearthed in a distant, far-off era.